All right, here we go. Red versus blue, number 77. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we're back with another laundry list of amazing governmental bureaucracy, craziness. How else can I describe this, Keith?
Mass suicide by Republicans? I don't know. So, Mike, this week, President Trump settled a lawsuit that he himself had brought against his own government in the amount of $1,776,000,000 to fund those harmed by the weaponization of government. Ironically, he's the one weaponizing government these days, but among the potential beneficiaries are the J6 rioters, election deniers, various Trump cronies. There will be a committee appointed by the Attorney General without any kind of confirmation who will be responsible for adjudicating these claims, not a judge. Interesting to note, he settled with the Justice Department before it got to court, before a judge could rule that there was no basis for there being a case because there is no real adversarial parties. As part of the settlement, Trump also exempted himself, or the Treasury Department agreed through justice, to basically hold him harmless for any prosecution for tax fraud. As you'll recall, going all the way back to the 2016 election, his tax returns have not been released because he claims they were under audit. Whatever the audit found, and what most people believe, and those who have looked at them and analyzed them believe, is that he had a $100 million tax liability, will not be able to be prosecuted in court. So it was let's give it this, a creative way of getting to creating a slush fund for the J6 defendants and reducing his tax liability by $100 million. It stands as the singularly greatest example of fraud in government, perhaps in the history of the American Republic. Period. End of sentence.
That's a pretty wild claim. But then, as I was going to ask you, all parties, they're all the same person. They're all Donald Trump, both sides of the argument, right?
Well, that's right. That's why it was so easy. He could figure it out. But let's give him this. He finally got. Maybe that's what Pam Bondi maybe had a standard that she wouldn't do this, but apparently Todd Blanche would, and so they did it. It's an amazing situation. Now, what it has done is it has catalyzed the Senate. That, coupled with his opposition of Senator Cassidy, who lost in Louisiana, and Senator Cronin, who is probably going to lose today in Texas. We'll talk about those Senate races a little bit later on. But along with the other senators who are not running for re-election, Tillis, McConnell, Collins, who is and is in a tough race, but is critical for Republicans, Murkowski, who has been independent, and John Thune, the Republican leader, they know that this position is radioactive for candidates in the fall. Mm-hmm. And so it is likely that Congress is finally going to raise the backbone and push back on this. Even Mike Johnson was forced to adjourn the House. He sent them out of town because even the House Republicans were going to go crazy. I've seen a couple of them on TV trying to defend this. It is an indefensible position. Candidates who attempt to do that in the fall are going to just be eviscerated. It is radioactive in these House races. So you're going to see congressional Republicans try and find some distance with the White House on this. And it happens at the same time as they were trying to fund $1 billion for the ballroom. That is not quite as radioactive, but typically as bad. And so both of them are now getting lumped together. There was a very angry meeting with Todd Blanche and the Senate Republicans. Even Ted Cruz said it was as angry a meeting as he's ever seen. So he's finally reached the point where there is pushback. I would also say, Mike, I think this ended Todd Blanche's chances of being confirmed as Attorney General. He'll be able to serve 120 days as acting, and then they'll have to find another acting. He will not be confirmed having, I think, brought this forward.
Well, like everything else, though, can Trump just ignore all of this and say it's happened? I'm going to compensate these people and yada, yada?
Well, yes and no. Yes, until Congress says it can't. And they pass a law or they deappropriate or whatever they do that would prevent this. But I think there's going to be enough Republicans who understand the handwriting on the wall who are going to want to work with Democrats to stop this from happening, because, as I said, it is the greatest example of political corruption in American history.
All right. And then the other issue is the war in Iran. Is it a war? Is it not? Is it still going? Is it over? What? Explain to me, Keith.
Well, Mike, it's 1:00, so it could have changed since we started on the air. But we had the announcement over the weekend that peace is at hand. And we had the announcement over Monday that bombs are dropping and missiles are flying. We are left to wonder exactly what is in the agreement. Several, and I will say conservative commentators have come out and say that America has lost the war. And we are facing the truth that this conflict is going to leave Iran stronger, more influential. It will have a negative impact on Israel. Our Arab allies are questioning our resolve. Our European allies are questioning our sanity. And China and Russia are taking advantage of this. There was to be a war authorization vote in the House because enough Republicans signed a discharge petition. That was what was delayed when Mike Johnson adjourned the Congress and sent them all home. So even Republicans in Congress are realizing that this is an idea that is fraught with incompetence, frankly. And it's becoming clear to the world that Trump has absolutely no idea what he's doing in this conflict. Now, he's hemmed in because he has to negotiate an agreement that is arguably better than the agreement that President Obama had.
Yeah,
which had its flaws, and left some loopholes. But nonetheless, it appears to be, at least on paper, a stronger agreement than what Trump has agreed to as part of the ceasefire. That's going to put him in just an awful box, and he will be pummeled by the Democrats, rightfully so, through the course of the election. Republicans will sit there and want to, once again, avoid the stench of being in the same room with it.
You don't think there'll be Republican pushback as well, since they were so against the Obama plan?
Oh, I think there'll be big Republican backlash. I think Republicans will oppose it on two counts. Number one, it is a worse deal than we had with Obama. And number two, you got us in a war you said you weren't going to get us in, that we shouldn't have been in to begin with. And number three, it leaves Israel and our Middle East allies in a worse position than when the war began. And it's now made the Strait of Hormuz a sort of critical asset to the other side. Not to mention the fact it's tanked our economy, it's tanked the world economy, it's driven up gasoline prices, it's made the economy a shambles, which all of these guys are going to have to run on. So, yeah, I think there's going to be Republican pushback on multiple fronts.
Again, I have to ask, will the American people be able to see it, though?
Let's separate the American people writ large from the MAGA base. The American people are already, by a 60% margin, angry and concerned that this war has been a failure and that the economy is in the shambles. The MAGA base is, again, dazed and confused. But even they, 20 points of the MAGA base are peeling off on this. So, that's not enough for victory if you're, running based on your warm relationship with Donald Trump.
And they're translating that into their economic situation because they realize this war is causing prices to go up. They go to the gas pump every few days and they see that. So it really translates on a very grassroots level.
The most effective political advertisement in America is the price of a gasoline station on those electric signs.
Okay. Gave me a note that says the Senate is in play for Trump, right?
Just when it looked like the Democrats were in disarray, that they were not going to be able to put together a winning campaign, Trump steps up and bails them out once again. He endorsed Ken Paxton in Texas. Today is the runoff. Paxton is leading by as much as 20 points in some polls. I don't think he's going to win by that much, but I do think Paxton is going to win. Paxton trails Tallarico up to 8 points. He is a worse candidate than Paxton. He carries a lot of baggage. There's a lot of moderate Republicans in Texas, people who have relocated from other states, who are not going to vote for Paxton under any circumstances. While you would have to say the Republicans still have the advantage in Texas because of registration, they're now going to spend tens of millions of dollars in a race they did not have to do and would not have had to do had Cronin been the nominee. And then let's look at the other races across America. In North Carolina, a Republican seat that Trump has forced Tom Tillis out of, Roy Cooper, the former governor, is up between 7 and 11 points. In Maine, Planter is up against Susan Collins by 7 points. Now, she's a hard and vigorous campaigner. Trump has said she doesn't deserve to be reelected, but the Republican Senate depends upon her being reelected. In Alaska, Pelota, the former Democratic congresswoman, is up by 6 points against Sullivan up there. In Iowa, state nobody thought was in play, the Democratic generic, they haven't had their primary yet, but the Democrats are up 1 to 2 points. In Florida, Vindman, is the Democrat, is up by 2 points versus Ashley Moody, the appointed senator that nobody has heard of since the day she was appointed. But Florida and Texas are in play. The one Republican seat that the Republicans thought they could take is Georgia, but incumbent Democrat Ossoff is up between 7 and 9 points. The one bright spot for Republicans is Michigan, where former Congressman Mike Rogers is up between 1 and 5 points. That would be a Republican takeaway. But if you add them up, Texas, North Carolina, Maine, Alaska, Iowa, Florida, the Republicans have a 3-vote advantage in the Senate. So you have to say now advantage is shifting to the Democrats. In the generic House vote, the Democrats are up between 4 and 11 points, depending on which poll you look at. Today, the Alabama Supreme Court stopped the Alabama gerrymander that would have taken away one black district there. And in South Carolina, the state Senate has adjourned without eliminating James Clyburn's seat. So those were two reapportionment gains the Republicans have been counting on that may not happen. Alabama can still go to the Supreme Court and could get overturned. But with the Senate adjourned in South Carolina, that's not going to happen.
With the Republicans struggling everywhere, based on your commentary just then, all of the above, all of the things we talked about at the beginning of the show play into this, right? The war, the economy, the slush fund, the ballroom, and we haven't even mentioned the Epstein files. So all of these play into those numbers changing?
Yes, you've seen Trump is at his lowest point in his polling career right now with the American public. It's taking a big toll on these Senate candidates. You see it in the polls there. You see it in the House candidates. It's just a lot of baggage for those House and Senate candidates to carry. So they're all going to try and offload that baggage as much as they can and hope the economy gets better. But the economy is not getting better.
And this is an election year when we said before all of this took place that the Republicans they had their back up against the wall anyway, because that's a tradition for a president to have a problem at the midterms.
Yes.
And he's just made it worse.
He's made it substantially and significantly worse for the Republican candidates in the fall. And it seems that he is unconcerned about how his policies are going to affect those candidates, as witnessed by the rollout of the slush fund and the arch in Washington and the $1 billion for the East Room and the other unpopular policies that seem to be a weekly occurrence, as well as the incompetence and lack of any kind of policy direction for the war.
But as we know, in the past, we've seen the Democrats blow it, even with everything on their side, and you think there might be some cracks in that armor.
Well, as bad as the Republicans are, the Democrats aren't doing themselves any favors. This week, they released the partial autopsy, which is partial for many reasons. It ignored Biden's age as an issue. It ignored the nominating process that Harris was forced to go through. It soft-pedaled her position on social issues, although it did say the ad, the they-them ad, was one of the most effective that they'd seen in terms of tagging and defining her, and she was unable to define herself. The problem for the Democrats is that they have no clear leader, and most importantly, no clear message for 2028 in terms of what they stand for. They can't figure out whether they're pro or anti-Palestinian, where they are with the Israelis, where they are on social issues, where they are on trans issues, and they can't figure out how to talk to Americans coherently about economic issues. Republicans do have a big money advantage, more than $100 million. So they've got serious issues, and they do have radical and unelectable candidates in many races. And if they make it through the primaries, the Democrats will forfeit a golden opportunity.
If they win the midterms and do well in the House, at least, they can regroup and hopefully come up with a leader for 28, which I don't think is evident yet. It certainly isn't in my eyes. So they do have time for that, right?
They have time for 2028. So that's on their side. But again, they have to be coherent. They have to be relevant to issues that face real people. And they have to have solutions that solve problems without creating greater problems.
Okay, let's move to the California governor's race.
Election is 1 week from today, Mike. But there's been a change. In monitoring the voting returns, both here in Orange County and across the state, Republicans have voted much earlier than they have in the past. They have basically ignored Trump's admonition that mail-in voting is bad, and they have outperformed Democrats percentage-wise in terms of early voting. Democrats are holding back, and I think the reason is because Democrats can't decide who their candidate ought to be, and they're trying to vote strategically. You've got Xavier Becerra, who's probably a more electable candidate, and Tom Steyer. You've got a lot of people who are anybody but Tom Steyer. You've got Katie Porter, who's bleeding votes away from Tom Steyer and is unable to get any traction herself because of Tom Steyer. You've got two very competent candidates, frankly, in Mahan and in Mayor Villaraigosa, who are stuck at the bottom of the pack and are not going anywhere. So Democrats were very late deciding, and we'll see what they decide here. It's likely we won't know the result until several days after Election Day.
And I, as a Democrat, have held off on my vote. I normally try to get it in early. I am going to hold off until the last minute to try and figure out which of the two top Democrats to vote for. I'm not sure strategically how I should do that. Maybe I can get some advice from you. Do I vote for the one that's a little less down on the poll, or do I vote for the guy to get it all? My thinking is it'd be nice from a Democratic point of view to have two Democrats running against each other in this crazy way of electing a governor. What do you think?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Mike, because we had a lot of talk early on about the fact that you could have two Republicans make it into the runoff, given the size of the Democratic field. Less talked about was the fact that you very easily could have had two Democrats make it into the runoff, given the fact that there were candidates coalescing and one of the Republicans was failing pretty substantially. I think now it looks more likely that you will have Hilton as the Republican and either Bercia or Steyer as the Democrats. My personal strategy was I was going to vote for the person who was in second if Steyer was in third to keep Steyer from making the runoff. I ended up voting for Hilton because he was in second. They flipped. I saw a poll the other day that shows Steyer ahead of Becerra, so I would have voted for Becerra if I'd waited probably 3 or 4 days. But you've got a lot of people trying to make that kind of calculation based on who they want to get into the runoff. So, like I say, I do not expect to know the outcome until a few days after Tuesday.
And then there'll be a reset, and we'll do it all again for November.
We will. I think the Democrats' odds will probably look better once that reset's set.
And finally, not a big story. Well, it is a big story, but in comparison to everything else, it's not that big. Tulsi Gabbard has resigned.
She has. Now, her husband is sick, and we obviously wish him well, and our prayers are with him as he recovers from cancer. But Tulsi, our national security director, had been sidelined for major decisions. She was in Hawaii when we decided we were going to go into Venezuela. She's been, frankly, opposed to our action in Iran and has been sidelined there. Trump has consolidated intelligence. He says he's his own intelligence agency, which is probably part of the problem in our country. Women continue to be ushered out of the administration at a record pace, but they're running out of women. So I think Hickseth should now start getting worried because he's going to end up being the fall guy for the war. Most of us say we've lost ground there, and I think he's going to be the guy Trump blames for it. But again, a major change in the administration, another challenge for him to find somebody to fill this job. But he's not interested, frankly, in intelligence advice. Like he said, he thinks he is his own intelligence director. And the results speak for themselves.
As we always say at the end of this show, stay tuned, because you never know what's going to happen. In fact, the slush fund, if I remember right, that hadn't even popped up when we last met, right, Keith? That was
another day, another $1 billion, Mike.
That was a completely new thing that was thrown into the mix. So you never know what is going to get thrown into the mix. And so that's a good reason to subscribe, to tell your friends, to join us on Facebook. And we'll see you next time on another edition of Red versus Blue.
Get out and vote, everybody.